For more discussion around the situation, joined by Marc Schulman, author of Tel Aviv Diary and a columnist for Newsweek, and frequent, often guest of ours. Marc, good to have you with us. Look, there was overblown hype, I would argue, of the great Israel-American breakup really just weeks ago, as it looked like, Iran and the U.S. were talking about a peace agreement that was excluding us, F-35s going to Turkey. Look, how do you see the state of relations between the Prime Minister and President this week?
Hard to know. We don't know what's in President Trump's mind, to be quite honest with you. We're going to find out maybe a little bit. I don't think it's improved all that much. I don't know how bad it really was. I'm more concerned about the overall relationship between the United States and Israel, less so between the United States, between Netanyahu and Trump. Both of them are old men who will not be in power all that long, and whatever happens politically. And I'm much more concerned about that direction. And I'm quite fearful from this trip. I think this trip is a trap. Regardless of how it comes out, we lose as in terms of the state of Israel. Because there's two possibilities in this trip. One, that he successfully convinces President Trump to return to fighting a serious battle with Iran, which is clearly what Prime Minister Netanyahu, I think, wants. And if he succeeds, then we get blamed if something goes wrong. And even if it goes well, it's a very unpopular war in the United States. Less than 40% barely support the war, and probably even less. If he fails, it shows he has an inability to influence Trump. So either way, we lose. So I thought this could be done by much better with a quiet video conference than a physical appearance. Yes, going to the funeral of Senator Graham is important. He was a great friend of Israel, and showing support for that is fine. If we had a good foreign minister, we'd send the foreign minister, which would be most appropriate, obviously, for the death of a senator.
Yeah.
But we are where we are.
No, of course, and I think it's good to see at least the Prime Minister is going to that. And I agree. Look, these two may not be in power a long time, but we're talking about the short-term issues right now and war aims for what may happen in the coming months. The political issues internally for both these leaders seems to be causing them to diverge on these short-term war aims. Where Netanyahu is largely seen as wanting things to come back, ramp up, perhaps maybe not this week, but sometime before elections. President Trump not so. Do you think they're reconciling that?
No, I don't think they can. I mean, it's two very clearly different goals. Now, President Trump may have written off the midterms. I don't know. Doesn't look particularly good for the Republicans right now. On the other hand, Trump does not write off anything too soon, so I'm not sure he's willing to write him off. Netanyahu certainly isn't going to write off his own elections, but unless something changes drastically, it does not look like he's going to win. So both of them want something very, very different. Now, of course, you got to look at also the needs of the state of Israel. There's nothing more important to the state of Israel than the fall of the Iranian regime. Right. The problem is we don't have the magic hocus pocus to make that happen, it seems. And that's really the problem. The problem with going back to war right now with Iran is how do you achieve the goals you want to achieve? And it's not at all clear. No one has presented a policy that will actually work.
Well, many argue, Marc, I want to jump in. Many argue that, the president was holding Israel back or had canceled, some much more further reaching ideas about going after the regime. And I'm going to bring Senator Graham back into it for a minute. He was recently revealed as saying that he'd, maybe we know this already, but that he'd fought back against many in the administration to keep military pressure on Iran at all. What kind of loss is Graham in the picture now for, let's say, those who are willing and want to fight? I mean, who and what now takes over that role in American politics?
I don't see anyone on the American political scene, certainly in the Republican Party, who's both willing and able. And able is also important because he was also very thoughtful, very knowledgeable. There's no one quite like him. Plus, he managed to get really close to President Trump. He did the almost impossible. He was one of the hardest critics of him. And then he managed to switch 180 degrees and became one of his closest friends. Yeah. So I don't see anyone who's going to fill that role anytime soon. And that's part of the issue. Who's surrounding President Trump right now who's really a close friend of Israel? That's a real question. Yeah. Graham really was that role. I truly believe that President Trump is a good friend of Israel and truly wants for our best. He may not want the same best that Prime Minister Netanyahu, but he truly wants for our best. I don't know who else is in the immediate administration who feels the same way and is capable of doing it in the same sort of way. Look, one of the biggest problems that exists both in Israel and the United States right now is you look at the fact that there's no active Security Council. In other words, who's the National Security Council in the United States right now? When was the last serious discussion that took place about strategy in Iran by the National Security Council? I'll go the same way back to Israel. And so decisions are being made by two men, Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump.
Yep.
However capable they all are, I'm a strong believer in the wisdom of the crowds to some extent, and I fear this situation where both of them are going from their gut to a very large extent. So we can hope for the best. We also can hope for the best from this meeting. I hope it doesn't get a lot of media coverage. And that's one of the problems. One of the most important things for Israel right now to do in the United States is take a lower visibility. Doesn't need to be in the news all the time.
Now, I'm left to wonder if Prime Minister Netanyahu will do a robust media tour, or even perhaps while he's there, we'll find out.
Of course he's going to do that. Listen, he goes to the United States to get media here in Israel, but he gets it in New York too. And then, of course, in September, he'll go back and confront Mamdani, another great success. So we look really great here on television, but it's not going to do us a lot of good in terms of American public opinion. And, we really, really need to worry about that. That is probably our greatest strategic threat right now, is the views of Israel in the United States. And we need to be working on that 100% of the time, and everything we do needs to keep that in mind. But who's
Marc
thinking
Schulman
about that right now here?
Thanks for being with us. I share the sentiment. Thanks for joining us in the discussion.
Pleasure. Take care.